Every morning at Balmoral, something strange happens. A maid walks into an empty room, pauses, and then curtsies. No one is there. No one is watching, and yet the gesture must be done. It doesn't matter if the royal left seconds ago. It doesn't matter if the room is silent. The rule is simple and absolute. You bow to the presence even when it's gone. This tradition is over 150 years old, and no one has ever dared to question it. But that's just the beginning. Because behind the postcard beauty of Balmoral Castle, behind the rolling green hills and royal smiles, there exists a hidden world most people will never see. A world where vacuum cleaners are forbidden, where maids scrub carpets on their hands and knees, where some workers put in 18-hour days and are told their loyalty is reward enough. And then there are the secrets, the kind of secrets that don't stay buried forever, the kind that make dozens of staff walk out, overnight. It all began in the summer of 1852. Prince Albert, scanning through listings, came across a rain-soaked advertisement for a Scottish estate. Without making a grand announcement, without even telling Queen Victoria, he quietly purchased it. The price? Around $32,000 at the time, a figure that would translate to millions today. That estate would become Balmoral. Within a few short years, the original house was demolished. In its place rose a granite castle, completed in 1856, solid, imposing, and designed with meticulous care. Prince Albert didn't just approve the plans, he lived them. He sketched the clock tower himself. He positioned windows for the perfect flow of fresh Highland air. He even carved symbols representing each of their 9 children into the structure. Nothing was accidental. The hallways were intentionally narrow, not for space, but for chance encounters. Albert believed that if people crossed paths more often, they would grow closer. Even the sound of the clock tower was carefully chosen. It rang in a soft E-flat tone, so it wouldn't startle the ponies outside. Over time, the estate expanded into something extraordinary. More than 53,000 acres, mountains, forests, over 150 buildings, a private railway built in 1866, used not for people, but to quietly transport royal belongings. And, perhaps most importantly, Balmoral was never public property. It belonged to the royal family, personally, which meant any income from the land, timber, cottages, hunting, went directly to them. When critics in Parliament raised concerns, King Edward VII refused to budge. He called Balmoral the family's inescapable refuge. And in many ways, it was a place where the rules of the outside world didn't quite apply. But for the people who worked there, Balmoral was something very different. Every year during hunting season, nearly 150 staff members lived on the estate. Cooks, cleaners, stable boys, gamekeepers, and even one man whose sole job was to play the bagpipes every morning at exactly 7 a.m. beneath the king's window. From the outside, it sounded almost magical, but inside it was something else entirely. Because before any of them could begin work, they had to make a promise. A lifelong promise. Silence. Break it, and your career wouldn't just end, it would disappear. The days were long. For the youngest staff, they began before sunrise. At 6 a.m., maids gathered in the old kitchens, polishing hundreds of pieces of silver until they reflected like mirrors. By 8, breakfast had to be served, quietly, efficiently, and without error. Then came the endless walking. Heavy tea trays carried through cold stone corridors, careful steps taken to avoid waking the royal dogs. By midday, it was time to peel mountains of potatoes. By afternoon, change uniforms and prepare for tea service. By evening, clean mud-covered boots from the day's hunts. And by night, if they were lucky, they reached their attic rooms before exhaustion fully took over. 15-hour shifts were normal. Overtime didn't exist. There was only one line in the staff manual. Loyalty is its own reward. But loyalty came at a cost. Vacuum cleaners were banned, not because they didn't work, but because Queen Elizabeth disliked the noise. So instead, every morning, maids knelt on the floor, pushing small horsehair brushes across vast carpets. One hallway alone could take nearly an hour. The dust clung to their clothes, their hands, even their lungs. Aprons had to be washed multiple times a day. And yet the pay never changed. By 1990, this one rule alone had added hours of labor daily. Still no one spoke, because speaking was dangerous. There was an unspoken understanding inside Balmoral. You hear nothing, you see nothing, you remember nothing. In 1986, one maid learned this the hard way. While dusting a room, she overheard a quiet conversation between Prince Charles and Diana. Before she could react, another servant whispered sharply, "Act deaf." The next morning, she received a formal warning. 2 strikes, and she would be gone. Even accidental awareness was treated as disobedience. Over time, many staff stopped using words altogether. They communicated through glances, gestures, silence. The halls of Balmoral weren't quiet out of respect. They were quiet out of fear. And then there was the rule that unsettled even the most experienced workers. If a royal left a room and a maid entered moments later, she still had to curtsy to the empty space, to the absence, to what they called the lingering presence. In one evening alone, during the annual Gillies Ball, staff reportedly performed this gesture over 60 times. Some left with bruised knees. Others described it as bowing to ghosts. But no one questioned it, because tradition always came first. Once a year, however, the atmosphere shifted. The Gillies Ball, an event where for a few short hours the rigid hierarchy softened. Staff and royals danced together. Laughter filled the halls. Even the king would take to the floor. A dishwasher might find themselves dancing with a prince. For one night, it almost felt normal. But even here, the rules remained. Your invitation revealed your rank, gold-edged cards for those closer to the inner circle, plain ones for everyone else. And at midnight, the magic ended. The royals left, and every staff member bowed in silence. But no system built on silence stays perfect forever. In 1988, everything changed. A young maid, barely 8 weeks into the job, decided to speak. She sold her story to a magazine. In return, she earned more in a single payment than she would have in years of service. And what she revealed shocked the public. Private routines, dinner rituals, moments never meant to leave those walls. Within days, the story spread across tabloids. Millions were reading about Balmoral for the first time from the inside. The palace reacted instantly. Statements were issued, investigations launched, every staff member scrutinized. From that moment on, secrecy was no longer just expected, it was enforced, legally. But even then, the leaks never truly stopped. Over the years, more voices emerged. Stories of freezing attic rooms where temperatures dropped near unbearable levels. Of workers waking up in damp uniforms, breathing in air so cold it formed frost on the walls. Of illness ignored. Of complaints punished. Some left quietly. Others were forced out. And slowly, a pattern began to form. Fast forward to recent years, and the cracks became impossible to ignore. Between 2024 and 2025, something unusual happened across the royal estates. Staff didn't just leave. They walked out together. Gardeners, housekeepers, cleaners. Out of entire teams, only 1 or 2 remained. The work hadn't changed, but expectations had. Workers were managing acres of land by hand, forbidden from using modern tools, heavy loads carried daily, long hours under pressure, pay that barely matched minimum standards, 1 injury, 1 denied request, 1 impossible demand, and people began to say, enough. Then came the breaking point. A staff member shared their experience online. Denied emergency leave while a family member faced surgery. Forced to stay to complete routine tasks. The post spread rapidly. Thousands reacted. And within days, more resignations followed. What had once been hidden behind stone walls was now visible to the world. Even today, Balmoral stands as it always has. Majestic, silent, untouched. Tourists see the beauty, the history, the elegance, the tradition. But behind those granite walls, there are still stories. Stories of loyalty tested beyond reason, that of silence demanded at any cost, that of a system that has survived for generations by remaining just out of sight. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is that many of those rules, those rituals, those expectations still exist, unchanged, unquestioned, and waiting for the next person brave enough to speak.